Thanks for listening to Draw Near with Fred and Kara. And we have another special episode for all of the fathers listening, and definitely the moms if they're interested. Today's episode is called Fatherhood Baptism by Fire, because that is essentially what parenthood is.
Yes.
And then I like the little subtitle, Wives and Whiskey, because in one of them, Fred and BJ, my husband, get to talk about their wives, which is Crystal and myself, while drinking whiskey. BJ literally was making an old fashioned before coming in and recording. So.
You know, it's funny, Kara, because as I was listening to it and going back and doing the editing, you can hear the ice like rattling it in BJ's glass so every time he takes a drink and moves, you can hear the ice. And so
and he's so proud of that ice because he got a little like ball ice maker because that's what goes in an old fashioned. So he's got a big like ball of ice in there.
He does make a pretty good old fashioned, I'm not gonna lie. So but it was really cool, just BJ and I to sit. They've heard about BJ a lot on the episode on Draw Near, so it was nice just to sit around, sip whiskey together. It was by Zoom because I've got some germs going on, which is why I've drank some hot toddies here. But it was nice just to...
Which is more whiskey.
Yes, which is more whiskey. Just to talk. And really the whole episode is just us looking for bonus points by bragging about our wives is really all it is. But, you know.
And I'm not in that one. And that's why, because, you know, I didn't want him to feel like pressure to compliment me. So that way it seems genuine. But really, I'm in the background like, come on, I'm listening.
Yeah. I don't remember where it was, but even at one point he says, you know, if Kara happens to hear this, and I'm just thinking, oh, she'll hear it. Yeah, I've got you covered. She'll hear.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah. That's hilarious. So your guys' conversation in this segment that's coming up is about fatherhood and marriage, right?
Yeah, it is kind of a combination of both. I think we kind of focus more on fatherhood, but certainly, that plays a part in there as well.
In the compliments, for
Correct,
sure.
Yeah, you can't have a healthy marriage without complimenting your wife, fellas. You can't do that. So.
And then our second guest is Taylor Schroll, who we both got to interview in that segment, and he's a good friend of ours. And that episode is about fatherhood. I'm helping interview, but I am not a father, so I'm really just there to like poke fun at both of you. So the usual.
Yes, really the usual. Yeah. And you do a fantastic job of that, but you don't choose which one of us you think is the better father. I realize
that would be like,
give that spoiler.
No, why would I do that? That would be like death to myself to be like, oh yeah, you're better.
Yeah, we thought it was such a good idea. We're gonna have Kara vote at the end of this episode. But
too bad we don't have a video podcast yet, because then we could add that compliment I gave Taylor at the beginning. I let him know he was looking especially bald in the video, but you guys won't be able to see it. So
yeah, it's hilarious, Taylor. I'm sorry, because in the recording, like, you give Kara a compliment, and her immediate response is, "You're looking especially bald."
I had to give him a compliment back. What can I say?
It was funny. I feel like we should post that on like bloopers, like bonus content or something. Yeah, it was hilarious. But anyways, it's a great conversation about fatherhood. A really frank, honest discussion about fatherhood. And we're blessed to have Taylor Schroll from Forte Catholic Podcast joining us once again.
Yeah, absolutely. So we hope you enjoy these two segments about fatherhood.
All right. On this segment of Draw Near, we have a guest you've heard his name mentioned many times. You've heard him talked about on our show many times, and I am thrilled that he's here with us. BJ Kardell. That last name should sound familiar. Welcome, BJ.
Howdy. How's it going?
Doing great. We're sipping on our whiskey as we're talking some dad stuff, so that's exciting. Feels amazing on my sore throat, as listeners can probably tell. Who is BJ Kardell? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, boy. I'm Kara's lesser half, as you all know. I'm Kara's husband. That's really all you need to know. This kind of speaks for itself. If you know Kara, then I must be pretty awesome.
Yeah, that works. Yeah, that works. Yeah, I'm still impressed that my wife married me. So I don't know if you feel the same way. I'm sure you do. Yeah.
Every day.
So we are diving into our discussion on fathering and being a dad. And BJ, I'm just thrilled to have you on. I think your experience, we don't have to dive into the where, the what, the how, and of the why of the work you do, but I think you have a unique vantage point into family life and what this dad thing is all about. So I'm just grateful to have you on the show with us this week.
Well, I appreciate the invite. This will be fun.
So go back a little bit here. What was it like learning that you were going to be a dad? What was your initial response?
I think, when I was courting Kara, I had gone through kind of a lot of changes within my faith. And when I had met Kara the second time around, because the way I met her was she lived in my parents' basement when she was doing Totus Tuus. My mom was the director of religious side in Spencer, and Kara lived in my parents' basement for the time that they were in Spencer. And at that time, I really wasn't deep in my faith. And the second time that we kind of reconnected, I had really gone through a journey, and I discerned being a priest. And I wouldn't say it was a very long discernment, but, reading To Save 1,000 Souls, I came to a place where I knew I wanted to have children. Like, to be a dad was, I knew I wanted to be a dad. And so those initial conversations with Kara during, while we were dating and leading up to being engaged and married, they were very easy. And I never knew what to expect from that kind of conversation, because it was all obviously brand new. And we're just very open to life. And I mean, we got married and we were pregnant. And that's, I wouldn't, if I could go back, I'd do it the same way every time. Becoming a dad very early on in our marriage, it was like we had something that we didn't even know we were missing. When we had Clara the first time, it was just, there was so much joy, and it was such a blessing, and it was terrifying. I think people always talk about how having kids is so amazing. It's also terrifying.
Yeah. If they're honest, they'll admit it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's becoming a dad was the most terrifying, the most interesting, and the most beautiful thing that I've ever been a part of, or will ever be a part of, until from our kids, if there's grandkids down the line. I mean, that's like the lineage of being open to life, is that your life creates more life and more life and more life. But yeah, I think becoming a dad it's like the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl tenfold.
Nice.
Yeah.
Spoken like a true Chiefs fan.
Well, I can't really speak about the Chiefs today. We lost to the Colts yesterday. Colts. Yeah. Tough.
Yeah. What perceptions? Like, it seems like you were, although you had the terror and the excitement at the same time, which I think is a pretty normal response. It also seems like you were like really at peace with it right away. I know Kara has told the story on the podcast before of honeymoon baby. It was literally 9 months later. And so it seems like you came into marriage with that peace. Like, I'm doing this to be a father. Like, I want this. I want all of it. And yet a lot of times you get that advice of people telling you, don't do all those things all at once.
Wait, like, enjoy it.
Yeah. So looking back on, did you get that, and how did you deal with those sorts of things?
So there's two options. We could have either played a board game or been open to life. And I'm not I'm not a big board game player. So we were open to life. I think not having the just married time, I don't know what I missed, if there was anything to miss. There's always been children minus 9 months, and then, however long we dated. I don't know the alternative. I don't know what that's like. So, and for me, I wouldn't do it a different way. Like,
that was going to be my next question. Yeah.
No. It was like a way to grow up very fast. I felt mature, but I feel like knowing that you're bringing life into the world, you have this, I don't know, you grow up fast. And I was okay with that. And, we want a lot of kids. We're way behind you. But that was, the first step. And she was open to that. I was open to that. And I don't know. I don't know anything different. So
yeah, no, that's beautiful. That is a testimony in itself. And if there is anybody listening that's kind of in that same place, where they're being told one thing, but like their heart is saying another, or maybe that is their situation now. Like, I think you can look to BJ to see it can be okay. It will be okay. You can do this. Like, this is a beautiful part of marriage. So don't let other people tell you what your marriage is supposed to be like in that sense. Yeah. So that's awesome. What perception of being a dad did you have going into becoming a father, and how did like your culture, your experience shape that?
I have 5 other siblings. So I come from a big family, as does Kara. Kara has 5 other siblings. So we come from busy households in which, we had very nuclear families, very intact. I have actually 2 half brothers and a half sister. So we come from kind of blended backgrounds. But my dad was always present, and I spent a lot of time with my dad. And I think just all the small times that he spent with me as I got older, like I started to believe like I really want to do that with one of if I have a child, that's the dad that I want to be, there for the small things and really blow up the big things. And my dad was always really good at that. I don't think he knew that he was good at it though. It's just kind of who he was. So going into becoming a father, I never really had like one of those deep, oh my gosh, I'm going to be a dad. What am I supposed to start doing? Everything that just kind of felt natural, like it kind of fell in place. And I think that came from the support that I got from Kara. And I think also from the background of what I do for work. I moved to Sioux City basically to follow Kara and interviewed with Boys Town. And people say, oh, Boys Town in Omaha. Yes, Boys Town in Omaha, but we do have a site here in Sioux City. It's Boys Town, Iowa, in which we provide families in-home family services. Basically, we coordinate with the Department of Human Services for families who are referred for neglect, abuse, a wide array of things, and we provide them in-home services to help keep the children safe. And in my early 20s, I was working with very at-risk youth and families, and I didn't have any children of my own, and I was trying to tell these parents what the best way to parent, what the best way to keep their children safe, best way to avoid crisis. And for about the first year, I caught the backlash of, you're only 22, you don't have kids, who are you? And that I think helped me identify like, okay, what does a good parent look like? What does a not so good parent look like? And it doesn't take a lot to tell right from wrong, but with parenting, it's very dense. It's very thick. Yeah. There's a lot. And so I think that helped as well. And I don't know, it kind of came natural. Like it wasn't one day I woke up and it was just like, oh, okay, I know now. It's definitely a day-to-day thing.
It's interesting you reference your work, and I know Kara and I talk about this quite a bit. Is every day you're kind of faced with the good, the bad, and the ugly of family life, and yet you persevere on. I think that takes a special grace, a special gift, but because part of your work is kind of setting the ideal and kind of casting the vision for what the ideal parent or ideal family structure should look like. How is it hard to do that in your own home? And like, how do you deal with that, both in seeing the bad, but also in like living up to the standards you have for yourself?
Sure. I think having a good home life makes my job easier because of, seeing some really nasty stuff. You strive to help families maybe feel what love looks like or feels like to yourself, right? To everybody, it feels different. But then just wanting to come home and be better, knowing that some children don't receive love on a daily basis, to then go home and give your kids and your wife all the love in the world. Yeah. And from family to family, love looks different, right? In our family, love is, praying together, being together, spending very intimate moments where it's just close and maybe not a lot of talking and maybe it's just kind of lounging around. That's depending on what family you come from, that's as close as it gets. But some days are tougher than others. If you are happy, you want others to feel that way. And when you enter an environment where it doesn't seem like that, like, you're perceiving that it's not a safe environment for a child, you want to do everything in your power to make sure that child is safe, that those parents are educated, that those parents, are in a state to make positive choices regarding their children. And so you kind of, you're not doing it for you. Definitely ain't doing it for the money, doing it for the kids.
There's a beauty in what you're saying too, in the fact that you're trying to be that and inspire that in the families you're working with. So you yourself need that as well. And you recognize that need. So it's like you can't give what you don't have. So out of that, the love and beauty and goodness you experience in your own home, you're able to pour out in others. I like, too, that you point out, like from my own experience, I grew up in a very broken home. And a lot of what I've taken out of that is kind of similar to what you're saying, is how not to do things. And like that adversity actually inspires me to want to be a better father. So I see that as well in like what you see, what you deal with in work actually helps you to be a better father. So I think that's pretty cool. What are some lessons you've learned along your journey of being a father, especially early on? And maybe even if you want to add to that, like, what are some lessons you're continuing to learn?
Oh boy, there's so many though, aren't there? Like, as cliche as that is.
It's a tough question. Yeah.
I think one of the things that Boys Town has, the Boys Town model, and it's this tried and true practice of, the best way to parent kids using discipline strategies and using consequences, both positive and negative. And I think when we first had Clara, when she became of age, where you could start to teach and influence those kind of things, I thought I had it all figured out. Like, right? I had been teaching all these families, so many hours practicing and researching and putting into practice, and quickly just backfired. Like, I thought I had it all figured out. And it's literally a day to day. Like, if not today, then back at it tomorrow. And that's both with being a dad and with being a husband, is that Kara and I do not fight often, right? Because she'll win.
Right.
So why even? But, when things are difficult, it's God, blesses us with another day. Why keep hammering it on it today? We can get at it tomorrow. And I think just when you think you have it all figured out, that's when God just sits back. He sits back and he chuckles. And, he thinks he's hilarious, and he gives you something bigger to deal with. When you think you have the most on your plate, it's usually when he throws something else, because he's like, if you believe in me, you can make it through this. But you're going to keep growing. And it seems to be that way in, almost all aspects, especially being a dad.
And he loves the curveball of every child being their own and having their own personality. And like, knowing you, like, I know Clara's personality is very different from Gerard's. And, you can see that. And when we had Taylor on, we used the analogy of this kid is playing basketball, this kid's playing football, that kid's playing hockey, but they're all playing the same game together. But all those rules are happening at once, and somehow I'm the referee of all this mess. That's what it feels like sometimes, That requires a lot of humility, I feel like, as well, like recognizing, wow, I don't have it all figured out. And that's not always easy for us men.
I think the quicker you can self-recognize that and be okay with that, the quicker, your triumphs are going to be. Yeah. If you take someone who walks into every situation and says, I got it, and then they don't, well, then there's something wrong with somebody else, right? But if you walk into a situation saying, I'm going to give this my best go, and if it doesn't go well, I'm going to, plan, do, check, act. We use that at work all the time. Make a plan, do it, check if it's working. If not, make an action, change it, whatever that is. And that's kind of the approach to parenting, let alone, fatherhood. Everything is kind of baptized by fire, process of elimination a little bit.
I was looking for a title for this episode, and you just gave it to me. Baptized by fire.
Baptism by fire.
Becoming a father. Yeah, I like it. That's good. As we take a sip of our whiskey here.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
What, if you could hop in your Wayback Machine and give new dad you advice from your perspective now, what would it be?
On this third, we've had our third. I feel like, I've been much more with the other two. Well, Kara, now that we're outnumbered, we're in zone defense, I feel like I've spent a lot more time with the other two. Well, Kara tends to baby Aggie. And I think with Clara, I was kind of scared, I think, that I wasn't doing the right thing. And not that you shouldn't be scared. That's a good fear to have. It helps you keep babies safe and those kind of things. And it always makes you want to do the right thing. But I think a lot of times I was so scared to, I don't know. I was just scared of a new baby. It was, frail baby. And he's like, so I'd always want her to be with Kara. Because I knew, she was in there for 9 months. She's safe with Kara. Kara knows everything because she's now a mom. Let alone, she was in the exact same spot I was. And so I think as a new dad, take every opportunity to just completely dive into your newborn. Because those are times that, unless you have another kid, those newborn babies don't stay a newborn.
Yeah.
Right? They hit a month, they hit 2 months, and then they're just off and rolling.
Yeah. It's wild how quickly that happens too. Like seeing Francis next to Aggie, who they're only 6 months apart. But it's insane how, and you don't notice those changes day to day.
We just dropped off the kids. Clara and Gerard went with my in-laws over this weekend, and Gerard came back and was saying new words and stuff that
oh wow
I haven't heard him say. Yeah, and it was like full conversation. He's been doing that a little bit here and there, and it's just like they were gone for 3 days.
Right.
And he comes back and it's like, who's this guy? Like,
yeah.
You know? So, yeah, time goes by fast.
Yeah, I think that's some great advice because I think a lot of dads, especially the first, if you have more than one or maybe even more than two, you do kind of feel a little disconnected early on, and it can be very easy to not engage.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at my own experience, yeah, I had school things going on and whatnot and work, but I think also it was a little bit of being afraid. Like Crystal's mom, she knows better, you know, and so it took me a while to feel that same love and connectedness that she already had just by virtue of being a mom.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I think that's great advice. Like dive in as early as possible. Get those sleepy cuddles that make you fall asleep with baby.
Oh yeah, the best.
You know, yeah. Don't wait.
Yeah, don't wait. I feel like I've been very fortunate with my job. With Clara, I took 3 weeks of paternity. Gerard, I took a full month, and then with baby Aggie, it'll actually be about 6 weeks that I've taken. I go back to work next Monday. And just very fortunate to have a job where I'm able to do that. And you know, I think you brought up a good point of, you know, sometimes, especially when, you know, mom is breastfeeding, there's not a lot for guys to be doing to provide for a brand new baby when they are literally attached at the hip to mom for, you know, those very important, you know, first few months, like just very important bond that they're building. But to just be supportive of that, you're not out of the loop. Bodies are made different. Bodies are made for specific purposes. Mom's is completely fulfilling the physical needs of that child and helping that child grow. But to be present emotionally, I think, you know, when you share in the suffering that a mom gives for a child, like childbirth, like breastfeeding, like up every 3 hours. One, I think Kara would get very mad if I didn't wake up at 3 a.m. when, you know, she's getting Aggie changed and awake to feed and stuff like that, because that's just not fair, you know?
Right.
I think sometimes she does let me sleep through it, though, and I appreciate that. So hopefully she hears this. But I think just sharing in the suffering and the sacrifice is so emotionally important between you know, husband and wife when having a new baby, because you're sharing in the struggle and the becoming of a parent. Like that's it gets better, it does. But I think that has really been like a positive thing of our relationship, is sharing in the suffering.
Right. Nice. So I'm curious, especially in your line of work, unsolicited parenting advice. With other dads, we've had the discussion about whether dads offer unsolicited parenting advice. Kara tells me, and Crystal tells me, that moms do it all the time. But a couple of us others are convinced that dads really don't offer much in the way of unsolicited parenting advice. What are your thoughts on that?
Unsolicited to whom?
You didn't ask for it, but I'm going to tell you how to be a better father.
Sure.
Whether you want to hear it or not.
Gotcha. So just between dads in general.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, the only way I'm going to give someone advice is if they're asking for it. And I think that's just kind of be a guy thing. It's kind of that ego.
Right.
If I'm stuck on the side of the road, unless I'm flagging you down, do not stop for me. And it'll be with a road flare. Okay. But yeah, I think that might just be a masculinity thing where it's, unless I'm asking, let me struggle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. That's good. That makes sense. Changing gears completely with this next question, but I'm curious, you've referenced it quite a few times, but what role has your faith played in your relationship with your kids? And in being a father, how has your faith itself, you kind of started with this, but how has that shaped being a dad for you? Before
I'd met Kara, I had been very reliant on others to carry me in my faith. You know, sometimes that hurts to admit that I was ever in a state where it wasn't me leading, it was me being led. And sometimes I still feel like that. I think Kara is she's just so full of grace and so full of the Lord and love for the Lord that sometimes it's hard to like beat her, you know, to the punch. Like, she's just,
I feel like that when she's on the show with me. I feel the same way. Like, she's much more holy. She's way smarter and she's much holier than I am. So as much as I can, just as a friend, I understand, you know?
So sometimes, you know, before, you know, Kara and I had really gotten together and then pursued, you know, getting married, I felt like I had always been led. And so, in previous relationships and even, friendships that I'd built from coming back to my Catholic faith. And so I feel like I felt so comfortable because I really made a transformation, or really just let the Lord do his work in me being able to lead me, and then feel comfortable in being, the leader of the household. If you're not comfortable in that, it might be a little rocky, because you have a whole household that is depending on you as the faith leader of the home. There's a lot on your shoulders. But what I've learned is that never be afraid to ask for help, especially when you have, a lady by your side who is very committed to you and understands that things can be difficult. And Kara has just been, she's awesome, man. I knew this podcast was just going to be about our wives, but wives and whiskey. There you go.
Yes, wives and whiskey, even
Not
better.
bad.
There we go.
Not bad. So I think I kind of forgot your immediate question, but
well, wives and whiskey. What else? That's perfect. That's just originally it was how does your faith shape your family life, and living called it to be the domestic church. So
again, speaking of wives, Kara has all these like really cool ideas of like how to incorporate faith into our family home life. Like, I'm just not creative like that, and so from day zero of a newborn, all three of them, there's just little things that we do as a family, whether it's praying before a meal, and now we chant the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and the kids absolutely love that. It's hilarious. And singing Salve Regina every night before bed. Aggie, I'm sure will learn it very soon. There's just all these small things that lead up to very big things, like doing all those things in the home, and then Kara's taking the kids to daycare, and Clara will talk about how she wants to pray on the way to daycare. Anytime we pass a church, it's a sign of the cross and hi Jesus. And so I think just taking things from the church, implementing them in your house, makes your home so much more holy, because we don't just go to church for Sunday, right? It's got to come home with you throughout the week, because if we're just going to church 52 times a week, or 52 times a year, plus minus a couple, holy days of obligation, is that really, devoting? It's got to last throughout the week. So just finding those times with your family to do those, holy interactions is, you just almost, that's when I feel the closest, when we're able to pray and the kids are just silent, and it's like, you can see their brains working. I'm like, what are we doing right now? Oh yeah, we're praying. Like, that's so awesome to watch.
Any closing thoughts for those who might be listening? Maybe there's a guy listening that he's nervous about being a father, or maybe there's somebody that he feels pretty ordinary in his faith, or feels overwhelmed, like you mentioned, feeling overwhelmed by the task of being the high priest of the home, or I don't know, just any other closing thoughts, words of wisdom that you'd have to share with anybody listening.
God does not mess up. He doesn't. So if you go for it, just know that any prayer that you have is not going to be misled. And at the same time, like, kids are resilient. Like, it's to have a kid, it's a big undertaking as a parent. Like, you have a lot of responsibility. But just imagine that you get to decide what it is that your child grows up learning or grows up practicing, especially through the Catholic faith. Like, to instill what you know and what you believe through the Catholic Church in someone else, and a tiny little human, is like one of the coolest things. You're a teacher 24/7.
Right.
So to take what you know, what you believe, what you love, and to pass that on to your children, I mean, there's no greater responsibility. And it's just the coolest.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's the heart of the scripture. Many of us have heard a million times. A lot of times it's used as a reason to send your kids to, Christian schools or Catholic schools, but it's train up a child in the way they should go. And when they're old, they will not depart from it. And what that's getting at is exactly what you're talking about, is it, like, the true meaning in the original Hebrew. Find out those areas they're gifted, find out those qualities they have, form them in those things, lead them, guide them, point them to Christ, and when they're old, they will not depart from it. That's awesome. That's beautiful. Thank you, BJ, for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Fred.
Once again, we are joined by Taylor Schroll from Forte Catholic. Notice I didn't say the Taylor Schroll this time, Taylor, because there's another, as we learned last time you were here.
I've taken care of that problem in the last
Oh, okay. Well.
Like, you murdered him, or?
I will not say.
Okay.
Nice.
Right.
We have someone joining us today, Taylor. I'm trying to remember her name. It's been a while since she's been with us. Kara, right? Have you met Kara, Taylor?
I have. Best father I know.
Yeah, I'm
awesome.
here to talk about fatherhood.
I'm not here to share about fatherhood. I'm here to learn about fatherhood from Kara.
I
have a lot of wisdom.
Nice.
So.
Yes. A lot of good feedback. So yes. Well, this week, as Taylor said, we're going to dive into continuing the discussion we started with marriage. We're going to look at fatherhood. What does it mean to be a dad? And Taylor, drawing from Taylor's experience and maybe a little bit of my own, Kara as well.
My experience as a father, yes.
Yeah. And so we'll just go from there. So Taylor, I'm curious, and I'm especially curious with your answer. Like, what was your initial reaction to finding out you were going to be a dad? In those first moments, what was your initial response?
Yeah, I will answer your question, but at some point we will rank us as fathers, and I think Kara will be solidly in second, and we just have to decide which one of us.
Right.
Which
one of us? Okay, I like that idea. I like that idea. Or just for the sake of boosting one of our egos, we'll let Kara vote.
I will not.
Which one of us is the better father?
No, I'm gonna opt out of that
one. Yeah. So it's funny that you asked that. I don't remember. I don't remember the moment with my first because it was so long ago, right? I still keep my wife telling me that she was pregnant with our third in my wallet because she sent it like with my lunch to work. It was this very nice thing. I don't remember the first two, probably because babies make you forget everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I the only thing that I remember, it was just so early. Like, we got pregnant so fast that like we got accused of sleeping together before the wedding. We did not. It was just very quickly after. So it's just like we got married and like 9.5 months later we had a baby, you know?
Yeah.
So it was just like
ours was like we got married on April 1st and Clara was born January 4th. So 9 months.
April 1st wedding. If anything ever goes wrong, that's automatic terms for annulment. You're fine.
So. Nice. That's awful. This is the thing about marriage and fatherhood.
Yeah.
You're like, oh yeah, I thought this was a joke from the beginning.
That's funny.
The whole day was just a joke.
Taylor, I want to give you a chance to brag on your wife because Kara said, "Aw," and I feel like that was an invitation to tell the story of how your wife told you about your third child.
Yeah. So let's see. I don't have my wallet on me. It's in the other room. But essentially, she sent it. She, we used to be this pretty stereotypical couple. This was, 5 years ago. Now we're not. But it was pretty stereotypical. I was going to work. She made my lunch and she packed my lunch in, right? So she knew that she had the information for, a couple days or whatever. And she knew that I physically had the information for hours, but I wasn't going to see it until lunch. And so I remember specifically eating lunch very late that day because I was at work and I was busy. So she's just here waiting for me to call her, and it's like 2:00 and I haven't said anything yet. But it was a nice letter that she said. She was like, essentially the biggest thing that I remember is like the new Xbox was coming out or whatever. I'm a big gamer. And she was like, by the time the Xbox 5 comes out, we'll have 5 people in our family that can play because that was going to be our 5th person in our family. And so she tied in like gaming with it and she, let me know. But it was really funny that like, she was like, why didn't you call me earlier? I was like, I was busy. I didn't eat my lunch. I didn't see the note.
Nice. That's awesome. But you don't remember how you felt that first time. Yeah, probably because you were in grad school, I'll bet. Like grad school takes a lot out of you. What do you think?
It was that whole year. I remember you a little bit, and that's about it. We got married, we got pregnant, we moved across the country, we graduated undergrad, started grad school, got my first 40-hour-a-week job, and was doing all of that at the same time. So like I have very little memories of that. Like I have a lot of memories of like early memories of like when Chris, our oldest, was born. But like honestly, like I don't remember like that whole like 12 months, I have like 8 memories from my year in Ohio. That's how memorable Ohio is.
They all involve snow, right? Probably. Yeah.
Snow, Fred.
Yeah.
They all involve Fred.
Nice.
Our son's baptism where we prayed to a saint that doesn't exist. That was fun. It was good times up in Ohio.
Good times, yes. Yeah, I remember that. We had our kids about the same time as I recall. So nice. You were going to say something, Karen. I cut you off.
I feel like the way that we found out with our first was because our dog kept following me around. everywhere, like right beside me. He would follow me around. I'm like, what do you want? And dogs like sense that stuff. So I'm like, maybe I'm pregnant.
That's a very odd way to find out.
But for real, like we have 2 dogs now, but we only had 1 at that time. And now with every kid, like as I get closer to delivering, they both follow me around. Like I know moms, and I'm sure, so the plan is that we're going to have a mom series like this one as well. So spoilers for the listeners there, but I'm sure moms, like you can relate to kids following you around everywhere. Like you don't get a second in the bathroom by yourself. My dogs would follow me into the bathroom, or I'd close the door and I'd open it and they would be like sprawled across the doorway. I had to like step over them. I'm like, am I dying? Is that like, can you sense something? But it was pregnant and about to deliver, and they knew.
Yeah, so one of her dogs pushed her down the steps, Taylor.
They were following me so close that I tripped over one and fractured my ankle with my second, because
they're not helpful, they're just hungry.
Yeah, they're
demonic dogs.
They might be hungry, but they're definitely not helpful in any way.
Yeah, I was thinking that I was wondering, like from the beginning, it's like, are they helpful, or they like feel threatened by this new presence within the home? Yeah. But then also, it's like we talked about how Kara was going to bring a lot to the show, and first parenting tip: who needs to buy pregnancy?
Get a dog.
Just go to the dog
get a
park,
dog. There we go.
Yeah, it's more expensive, but it's effective.
I'm trying to think, like, what would you call that? Like Clear Blue Easy, Clear Blue Sparky, Fido? I don't know what that would be, but nice.
Dad joke right there. Good job.
Yeah, absolutely. That was 100% a dad joke. So Taylor, like, what perception of, like, what did being a dad mean to you? What did you think about, what was your perception going into being a dad, fatherhood?
Like what should you expect?
Yeah, like everything you brought with you from your experience growing up, the culture, things around you. Like, how did that affect being a dad for you early on?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is all of us, we either want to like replicate what we got that was good, and then like either correct or correct the things that were lacking in us, right? So I think it was pretty even. It's like there was a lot of great things that like my dad instilled in me, and it's like those are the things that I wanted to instill in my kids. There were also some things where like, maybe there were some things that were lacking that I wanted to make sure that I did for my kids, right? So that I find myself doing things to my kids way more than other parents because I didn't receive it as a kid, right? So it's like anytime we're going into anything, whether it's marriage or fatherhood or even just professionally or the spiritual life, it's like if you grew up in a parish that like for me, growing up in the parish, it was like I saw I lacked a lot of like enjoyment and joy and happiness in that parish. So it's like that's kind of like I'm trying to like overcorrect that, right? But there's also some good things that I experienced in the parish, so I'm trying to like add those to my spiritual life. It was pretty similar for fatherhood for me. There's a lot of really good things I experienced, but then maybe the things that hurt me, I wanted to make sure that I didn't do those things and come up with my own ways to ruin my kids, not do the same ones.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, that's similar for me. Like, as I think about it, I think a lot of the positive experiences I had growing up with my dad, those are the same things I enjoy doing the most with my kids now. Creative things. My dad was an artist, so I enjoy doing creative things with my kids. I often forget that I know how to draw until I actually sit down and do it with them. Playing games with my dad, that's something I enjoy doing with my kids. But at the same time, there are a lot of those things that I saw that, maybe the lesson here is how not to do things. I want to call Kara's dad out because he is the most amazing dad.
Yeah, call him out. Get him.
Yeah. He's a listener and a supporter. And Kara has said so many great things. So I want to give Kara an opportunity now to anything from your experience of your dad that connects here.
Yeah. Well, I actually told Fred, I'm like, Fred, you should ask my dad to do this because he's coming from a different perspective where like he has older kids. So maybe he's learned what are some things I did wrong? What are things that like I can see that impacted my kids? So I'm still going to throw that out, Fred. I think you should still ask him. And that can be later.
Let's consider this the invitation because we know he's listening.
Okay. All right.
It could be a
Dad,
bonus.
You should do this. Yeah.
Yes. There we go.
I thought I was being replaced like mid-show.
Yeah. Bye, Taylor.
You've been canceled, Taylor. You're canceled.
Yeah, I think my dad has a lot to say about fatherhood. And honestly, I think it's not necessarily something that he always tried to do intentionally, the things that he did and things that I look up to. I think it's just who he is as a person. Just very kind, very loving, very humble. And that really just always came out as a father. And I think one of the things I take from him and want to make sure like that's how I raise my kids as a mom is really just like his humility, because there are so many times where I mess up and I'm like, oh, please don't let that like impact their day or like make them sad or whatever. And I remember all the time my dad would, like, if we would be in trouble, he would, raise his voice and discipline us. And then like 3 minutes later, he'd come up to our room and be like, I'm sorry, I raised my voice. And like, he'd talk about it to us. And I always thought that was really loving. It was a really good example of a very loving father. So that's kind of something that I want to do, because there are definitely those moments where I raise my voice at my kids. I'm like,
right.
man, not a proud mom moment, So
yeah,
I had to apologize every time I raised my voice. I'd spend my entire day apologizing.
But you're a loud person.
Yeah, so. Yeah. I feel like with Taylor, it's like, is he yelling or is that his talking? Is that his inside voice?
Yeah.
That's awesome. What were some like things you learned, some lessons, if you will, like going into fatherhood, whether it was in the early, like changing those infant diapers or whatever, or as they got older? What were some lessons you learned? Because I know with me, there was a lot of things that my expectations were unrealistic for their age. That comes to mind, for example. But what were some lessons you learned pretty early on?
Yeah, there's a little confession time. I think I very quickly learned that I judged parents while not being a parent, right?
Too harshly.
Too harshly, right?
Mm-hmm.
To the point where like all of the laundry list of changes in my life that happened whenever, Chris was born within that year of crazy change. And I was, working. I would wake up and go to grad school at 8:00 in the morning, start all my classes, go home, eat lunch, go to work. I was a waiter at Applebee's, and I would work from like mid-afternoon until about 2 a.m. And I'd get home, do my homework, and then go to sleep at around 3 or 4, and then wake up 7:00 to go to like I did that every day, 5 days a week.
And you stayed awake in class. I just want to point that out.
Yeah. It was grueling, right? So that's my first couple of months of parenting. April, May. He was born in April, May, June, July. We moved. So my first 4 months of parenting. I'm brand new to it. He's not sleeping through the night. It's incredible. So I get incredibly frustrated. So like as a non-parent, I never understood how could a parent shake their baby? Like that shaken baby syndrome that you always hear about. Right. I'm like, where does that come from? And I found myself multiple times, because I'm on 3 hours sleep and frustrated. My life isn't going, I'm frustrated with class and with work, and I'm primarily just exhausted. And there's multiple times at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, I would finally get to sleep, and then he'd start crying. And then he would be inconsolable for an hour. And it's like, he just yelled. The irony of him yelling right when I said that.
That's funny.
But it's like, I could see in that moment, it was like, I'm either going to shake him out of frustration, or I'm going to put him down in this bed and I'm going to walk away.
Right.
So it was just like,
please tell me you put him down.
I did.
Okay. I was like waiting for you.
One little shake, and then I put him down. Yeah. But it was just I couldn't imagine how anybody could get there. And I'm relatively a good person, right? But like the scenario of life and a new baby and a new situation, it's just like, it gave me a lot more understanding for like my parents, right? For any parents, like parenting is hard, especially when you're first kid, don't know what you're doing, didn't really know what you were getting into, It opened my eyes very quickly to like the empathy, but also like realizing that like I wasn't as patient as I thought I was. I'm very patient with adults. I was not patient with little kids. I like it just started showing like where I was lacking more than any like relationship I had ever had in my life, really,
Right. And those newborn cries, they really get you. Like
they pierce.
They pierce. They hurt, And of course they're supposed to, but it's similar for me when Hannah was born. It was during final exams, and she ended up having colic. So it was like 2:30 in the morning. We're driving around South Tulsa, trying to get her to sleep, because that driving in the car is the only thing that would work. And then we'd get back into the apartment, put her down in the car seat, and a lot of times just kind of collapse on the living room floor at like 4 a.m, get like an hour or two of sleep, and then go back to school and work and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, that's why you were asleep in class all the time.
Yeah, that's why I was asleep in class. Yeah, I could not do the 3-hour classes, that's for sure. But thanks for calling me out for everyone to hear.
I got yelled at in class for yawning. That was apparently offensive. A certain sister consistently called me out for yawning. And I'm like,
really?
I'm tired.
Yeah.
I don't know what she was like, do you think this is boring? I said, honestly, I don't know. I'm on 2 hours of sleep and I can't think,
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I don't recall that ever happening to me once. She did make me sit on the floor by her desk once, though. So
that was this summer, Fred.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm not even kidding.
Yeah, but I was totally in on the gag, and I loved every minute of it. So it's all good.
You were a large child.
Yeah.
Yes. What are some things now that your kids are grown and different ages? I think my middle girl is the same age as your oldest because they're born around the same time. What are some current
That is
lessons?
how age works.
Yeah, that is how age works. Thanks for pointing that out. I'll fix that in editing. As you're transitioning, because I know your wife is back to work and you're kind of you're somewhat stay-at-home dad, but not really because you're working from home. So what are some things like as you're working through that transition? What's that like? What's fatherhood like for you now? Or some things you're learning?
Yeah. So
to put him in the back room, right? Right, Taylor? Just shove him in the back room.
Yeah. Shut up, I'm podcasting. That's
yeah.
He's in the back. I'm probably yelling at Fortnite. Is probably what he's doing. The funny thing that I've been wrestling with this week is Saturday was my son's first organized sport ever. He's starting kind of late. Like the age that he was supposed to start was when the world fell apart. So it took a little while to kind of get back into it. So he started playing flag football for he's representing his local Catholic church. It's like a church league thing or whatever. And he went to one practice and had one scrimmage. And just thinks he's the shiz, like he's the best player that's ever played. I watched him, he stopped listening to his coach. He made a few good plays, right? He's like, stop listening to the coach. He's like, he knows what he's doing. He's the best flag football player ever. He's, he doesn't need any, practice or coaching. He's like, I'm fine. And I'm like, you've been playing this game for 14 minutes, in your life. You know what I mean?
That's hilarious.
So it was the balance of the balance of yes, you are good and you are talented and you are, we're proud of you, but at the same time, you need to get better. You need to be humble. You need to listen to your coaches. Right. And it's this balance of trying to make him feel uplifted and positive. And, I approve of your good plays but at the same time, it's you don't know what you're doing. You need to listen to me. You need to listen to your coaches. You need to listen to and want to work hard and get better. So it's balancing those things, because either one of those are a pendulum swing that parents can get wrong, right? And a lot of people, especially when it comes to sports, a lot of people's parents, oh, my kids, I only love my kid and show him love when he plays well, or but it's I want to instill both of those things in him. It's yes, good, healthy confidence, but at the same time, you still need to get better and grow, because this is day 3 of organized sports.
And then will come the lessons of how to lose well,
Right. Yeah. It's funny because as you were describing what he was experiencing and how in that first 14 minutes, it sounds like an analogy for fatherhood in a way too, because I've known guys that go into fatherhood thinking they have it all figured out already. And maybe, and sometimes I've been like that. I remember being too hard on my kids after a mass one time. And then this mom of 8, I think I mentioned this in a different episode, but this mom of 8 just looking at me like I was a complete idiot, the way I was talking to my kids. And she was right. They're not teenagers.
Right.
Who, they're not super traditionalists that can sit through the mass and be super reverent. I need to be more understanding of my
Fred, I can't
2-year-old, I'm with you. But your sons and that example you use, I saw myself as a father in that, not listening to the coach, not listening, I've got this,
Well, and once you get it down, once you feel like you get it down, you're I mean, I'm in multiple stages with kids, but like this newborn phase, it's like I'm nowhere close to having it down. Maybe in a few months, I'll be like, oh, she's on a good schedule. She naps, she eats well. And then like 2 years later, I'm like, oh, let's start over. It's like I've been doing this a whole 14 minutes, and then they shift on you, and you have to like relearn. And each kid's different, so you have to address each one in different ways. And yeah, it's definitely a learning curve as you go, and I can't even imagine the teenage years you're in, Fred. So
it's almost like this kid's playing football, that kid's playing baseball, this kid's playing hockey, all in the same house, and you have to like navigate all those rules.
You have to know all the sports
against each other. Yeah, they can't decide what rules to play.
And you have to somehow coach the team with all those different rules and all those different sports. That's what it feels like sometimes. On that note, Taylor, what is the best unsolicited parenting advice you've ever gotten? That's a hard question.
If it's unsolicited, can there be a best? I feel like you never want those. You're like, okay, thank you.
Yeah, it was really funny. I was like, oh, I prepared for worst. I didn't. I think the best was one of my aunts. She was just kind of the idea of that it's never going to be perfect. You're never going to be perfect at it. You're going to make mistakes as a parent. Mm-hmm. They're going to make mistakes as kids. All you can do is your best. Pray for them, care for them, love them, teach them, doing your best. But it's gonna screw up. Is one of the things that my aunt has told me a couple of times. Kind of probably towards the beginning, the lost year in Ohio, probably sometime around there. And then just kind of periodically as like Kara, like you were saying, like at different stages, it's like
she reminds you that you're going to mess up at different stages. Oh, that's nice of her.
Yeah,
that's so nice.
Well, and there's a pattern.
You need people.
I get it.
Yeah. You need people in your life that are there to remind you that you are going to mess up.
That you're going to mess up.
Yeah.
I thought you were quoting, what was it, Scarface? You need people like me. You need people like me so you can point at him and say, that's the bad guy. That's what I thought you were saying, is that I'm the bad guy as the father.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
That's unsolicited advice. Compare yourself to others so you feel better about yourself.
Right.
That's what I just got out of that, Taylor.
Yeah, nice. Well, at least I'm not that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was right. Scarface, Tony Montana.
That's awesome.
Sorry, I interrupted you. So you're gonna mess up. Just love them, right?
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah. That's kind of what I was thinking too. I'm like, I feel like moms probably maybe a little bit more than dads, but you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. We get a lot of input on a lot of different things, and I think that's probably the best too. Is just what. At the end of the day, they're going to remember how much you loved them and how much, they felt that throughout their childhood. So just do your best to love them.
Absolutely. I think you're right. But I also think you're right in the other point. And Philip Grothus, when he was on, he talked about this very point that dads typically don't give unsolicited advice ever.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They really don't. They're just
it was
not
a girl for
comfortable with
Taylor.
that.
It was your aunt, you said?
Right.
Yeah. That's why dads are better than moms, obviously.
Okay.
All right. Remember, Kara's going to rank which one of us is a better father.
Yeah, you need to be sucking up.
So I will ask the question you were anticipating, because I don't know, a lot of times this brings out some funny stories. What is the best worst unsolicited advice as a father that you've ever gotten?
I've gotten a lot. And
all right.
It is all under the same theme of this is how you have to do it.
Okay.
So, for example, the example that I thought of was people and Catholic influencers and Catholic speakers and podcasters and every Catholic parenting thing out there ever says, don't let your kids have screens. It will ruin them, and they'll be unholy and bad kids, and they'll be disrespectful, and they'll be... Our kids watch screens all the time. And my kids are super sweet, and they're involved in their faith, and they make straight A's. My son, who spends the most time out of all three of my kids on devices, on Xbox and a phone that doesn't, it's not a phone, it's like an iPod, essentially, right? He got best Eagle. Like, he had the highest grade in his class, right? So it's just like anything that tries to say this is the one single way to do it, frankly, just pisses me off, because it's not true, right? It's like you have to find the things that work for your family. So now I don't want to make the same mistake and make people who parents who limit screen time feel bad, right? Because it's like, if that's what works for you and that's what works for your kids, great, but it's the any of the unsolicited advice that is this is something you have to do, other than like take your kids to mass and pray with them every now. Like there are some requirements, right? But it's more like the parenting methods. That is probably the one thing that is pretty frowned upon, especially in Christian circles or parenting circles, that we do all the time. Like, you know, Fred, you mentioned earlier, like how did we do the transition of my wife going back to work and me, I'm still working 40, 50 hours a week. What do you think my kids were doing when I was in here working? Like I'm doing the Lord's work here. My wife's is doing the Lord's work there. And then in the evening time, we'll all hang out and stuff. But it's like I'm sitting in front of a screen and he's over there playing Fortnite. It's just like it's stuff like that it's like you have to do this or your kids will be dumb heathens who disrespect everyone. It's just simply not true.
Right. And then there's that judgment coming in from outside people. I know you said like that was your mistake, was judging parents before you were a parent. But then sometimes you do feel that, even if it's just, you know, indirect and that's not their intention. Like you're like, I feel judged.
You made that point really well on the marriage episode. Anyone that hasn't, Don't Go to Bed Angry, it was. So anybody that hasn't heard that, I recommend you go back and listen to it. But you mentioned your faith and how dedicated your kids are. What role has your faith played in your relationship with your kids and in being a father?
Yeah, so it's been interesting because, like, you know, you talked about like little kids in mass and like obviously they're not like super paying attention, right? But like, our rule, like in our family, and we've done it with we have done it and completed it with our oldest, and we are literally in the midst of it right now with our middle child, is essentially when they start preparing for their first communion, like that, because they do preparation for about a year and then they receive the first communion, like that's the moment where they have to like start putting away the things that we have let them aid them to get through mass, right? The Cheerios and the coloring sheets and the you know, whatever toys or whatever they brought, right? But with my son, we completed that with him. He's gotten his first communion. My daughter right now, she's making that transition too of like, okay, let's start paying attention. Let's start paying attention to the readings. And they follow along in the book with us, and they kneel and they pray with us during the Eucharistic, Eucharistic prayer and that sort of thing. So, I mean, we're still at the point where like our youngest is still just hanging out. As long as she's not bothering the people around us, we're fine. You know, like that's kind of her rule. Like, just don't ruin it for the people behind us, and it's fine. You know? Yeah. So like my kids, like, you know, we pray together every night before they go to bed, and I think just we're blessed they're able to go to Catholic school, so they're just kind of surrounded by faith. They're surrounded by people of faith, which I'm sure, you know, y'all working in youth ministry for so long, like that whole sticky faith idea, right? Y'all have heard that, right? Where it's like, you know, for years it was like, okay, you need 5 to 8 people, or 5 to 8 kids for every one adult, you know, for like a small group or a class or whatever. And sticky faith is like, if a kid is going to remain Catholic or remain a Christian later on, the biggest thing is that they have kind of 5 people of faith in their life. So 5 adults to every one kid. And like, we have a community like with our parish and with our, you know, friends and stuff, where it's like, they're not just seeing us practice our faith, they're seeing our neighbors, they're seeing our friends, our adult small group. So they're just kind of like in like a Catholic community, which has been really good for them.
Yeah, I think I definitely can relate to that. Like that's something that we try to do the same thing with our kids, like talk about the faith with them often, pray with them often, like reference if they have questions about something that's completely just worldly, like we try and bring it back to the faith, to make that just a normal part of our family. And then like surrounding them with people who are also trying to be very faithful. And like, even, you know, when we have girl outs or random family dinner, we'll invite like the local priest or a religious sister or something, so they're seeing even the vocations, like, oh, these are normal people. I know my 4-year-old probably is not like, she's normal, you know, she just sees her as a person, as a woman or as a man. But they, you know, growing up, as she gets older and as my kids get older, they'll make those connections. Like they're faithful and they're giving their life to God, and they're also just like me, you know, they're very normal. So we try and do the same thing.
I feel like you have to tell the From Jesus story because it's just so cute.
I can tell the From Jesus. It's adorable. So we were having a potluck with a bunch of young adults, and we invited some of our like priests over and some of the religious sisters, and 2 of the religious sisters walked in, and my daughter had never seen religious sisters in their habits. and they walk in and they're wearing all white because it's summer, and she just gets so excited and she just goes, oh, are you from Jesus? and one of the sisters, she has like this megawatt smile, she just like lights up and she just goes, we are from Jesus. And I thought that was just so precious.
Yeah, well, you're right, just immersing them in it, Taylor. That's so important. Even I'm going back to what you said about screen time. Like if you are, I think we watch a lot of movies and shows together and things like that, but we also like talk about it. And if there are ways to incorporate the faith into that, we certainly do. Like how does Anna and Frozen look like Jesus? That sort of, those kinds of discussions,
Long hair.
Yeah, long hair. Long hair. Yeah. And I think that's an important part. I'm also seeing it in what you were saying earlier about your dad, ways to incorporate the faith with your kids. One thing I've done, and I didn't learn it from your dad, but it makes me feel like, oh, I'm a good dad because your dad did it, is like when he raises, when he raises his voice or thinks he might have been too hard, I do apologize to my kids, because I think it's important for them to see that witness of how to seek forgiveness and how to give forgiveness. And I think that's a good lesson for them.
Well, and associate the like fatherhood with loving forgiveness, because that's the father,
Yeah.
Y'all are teaching them about like God's love, mercy, and forgiveness. I am teaching my kids the important Catholic teaching of absolute truth. I was always right. So no apology necessary. I was right.
Dad's always right.
They're learning a different lesson, but same.
Taylor, if you could hop in your Wayback Machine, what advice would Taylor now give to new father Taylor back in your lost year in Ohio?
Did Wayback Machine Taylor, was this advice solicited or unsolicited?
Take your pick. Yeah, take your pick.
So if I was giving solicited advice, I'd probably just say like, you're going to do great, man. It's going to be fine. If I was giving unsolicited advice, it would probably be, what would I say? I think I'd probably say it's hard because like my primary thing is like to engage a little bit more early in my kid's life. So like so for me, like my wife nursed, so like the first 9 months, because of everything that was going on, but then also because like my wife nursed, so like I wasn't much help, so like it took me about 9 months to like actually fall in love with my son, right? Everybody's like, oh, I love them at first sight. I'm like, it took me 9 months. And then with the second child, similar situation, like it wasn't as crazy, but like still my wife's nursing, like I don't have that same connection as like mom did, right? Mom fell in love day one. It took me 9 months with the first kid, 6 months with the second kid, and 3 months with the third kid, right? So part of me wants to say like to try to engage a little bit more at the beginning with the kid,
right?
But at the same time, I think I would be pretty merciful with myself, right? Because it's like, I know the situation that I was in and how difficult it was to engage because of everything that was going on. So I think ultimately I probably wouldn't give myself advice. I'd probably just pat myself on the head. I had hair back then, so there was some cushion when I pat myself on the head. And I don't know, man. I think because essentially the question is like, what do you want to say to a new father? And it's just like, I think just encouragement, right? Because because like we were saying, a lot of times it's that unsolicited advice that isn't helpful, and I'll probably disagree with down the line.
Right. So. Yeah. I think if I was to ask myself that question at the moment, I think what comes to mind is take a chill pill. Everything's going to be all right. Don't stress. Just waste time with your kids and love them. Just waste time with them and love them. And I kind of hear that in what you're saying throughout this segment, is like, for you, being a good father, being a witness of Christ to your kids is just loving them. And, I've known you for more than 10 years now, and I see it in your social media. Like, your kids have been drawn into the things you enjoy and your hobbies. And so I think that's a beautiful example of both those things of, wasting time with your kids, but also being intentional about loving them and bringing them into your life. Like, some dads like to go fishing. They take their kids fishing. You like to play video games. Your kids they play video games. And so I think, just like your point of it doesn't all have to be one way. I don't know. I think that's a good witness of just being very intentional and very incarnational, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, and like the best thing that has happened in the last few months to a year in parenting was so like you're saying, like I enjoy video games, and I've like my son, I introduced him to a lot of like kids games when he was very young, and then so we started playing games together, like Pokemon and Yoshi games, but it's like it was games that I wasn't playing because I enjoyed them. I was playing them because they were at his level, right? And the big like change was like 2 months ago. He got good enough at Fortnite where like I started enjoying playing Fortnite with him, not just because I was spending time with my son, but it's like we were doing something together pretty equally, right? And like that was a huge like win of parenting, because now we're both very passionate about this thing and very much enjoy doing it together. So
yeah, I can so relate to that. It's kind of been the same thing for me. As Pokemon cards was kind of a thing that we in Legos we enjoyed as a family. Now it's become this whole thing where we just really love board games, and I've seen how much my kids have learned from that, but also like how we've grown closer together as a family, and how Christ is present in the midst of that, just taking something that would seem to some people maybe a waste of time. No, it's actually, this is how we love each other. This is how we do the domestic church.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Yeah.
And this is why Kara's the second best dad here. Me and Fred are ignoring our kids, and Kara brought hers onto the podcast.
Yeah.
Sorry. Well, that would be my advice to myself. Okay. My future self would tell my now self, I'm holding Aggie, so you're going to hear some, I love baby noises. They're so cute. You're going to hear some gurgles. Is to like just enjoy the snuggles, because I feel like I am a very like regular person, and so I'm like, okay, let's get them down for a nap, and let's try and get them acclimated to what their schedule is going to be at daycare or whatever. And so I with the first two especially, I think I was like so much that way, that now looking back, it's like, man, this is like the best phase. Like all they want to do is just cuddle you. And so I think that's my advice to like my future self. If I could go back, it's just love them, love the snuggles. It's the best part. And that's the difference between a mom and a dad, because that's the nurturing side. All I wanted to snuggle.
Yeah. I don't mind the snuggles. They do make me fall asleep, would be the only thing. So
yes, they're great. Yeah.
So I don't know if it has the same effect on moms, but it does on me. Well, Taylor, I want to thank you again for joining us for this segment. If people want to learn more about you and Forte Catholic, how can they do that?
Yeah, the biggest place would be, to subscribe to our weekly podcast, Forte Catholic, wherever you're listening to this podcast. And then we are doing a lot of stuff on YouTube now, youtube.com/Forte Catholic. We've got, podcasts. We've got a new 10-week Catholicism introduction lecture series. We've got pop culture stuff, which we talked about enjoying a lot here. So, those would be the two main ways of the podcast, and over on YouTube.
Awesome. Thanks again, Taylor.
Thank you, guys.